Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Please send her away. She keeps shouting at us." And he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly.
So last week I started by having a comment about Charlottesville, the recent issue that happened with the protesters and then the anti-protesters, and sadly a woman's life was killed in that debacle, for lack of a better word. And since then, the news media has been talking about it. There's been more protests, and Facebook and YouTube, everybody's got to share their opinion. And you know what they say about opinions? It's like noses. Everybody's got one and they smell. It's actually not noses originally, but the other part of the anatomy is not something we're supposed to talk about in church. But the point is, not to just fall in that trap and also have something to share on it. I thought I was done talking about it. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about it. But then I was gifted this gospel reading. And this gospel reading is about a woman who was not Jewish, so different ethnicity here. And you see Jesus, who is this compassionate, loving Messiah, that we're so used to opposing the proud and giving compassion to the humble. We're so used to him being against the Pharisees, the powerful religious leaders of the day, but being so compassionate, so loving to those who the society looks on in terms of lowly and looks on as less than. And yet, if we look at this verse honestly, the first thing that at least comes to my mind is rude, and it's Jesus being rude. And it's Jesus being harsh to this woman. But when I say that God gifted me this gospel reading, I actually am not really saying it satirically, because I actually believe that this message in it has everything I want to say about race divide, political divide, and what's going on in our country and one of the biggest problems we have in our society. And I'm not one of those who's like, society is all going to hell in a handbasket. I think it's a much prettier basket. It's maybe even a canister. Okay? It might be even a van, a minivan. We're all riding together. No, I'm not one of those guys who thinks that way, but I do think we are the most entitled society ever. And I think I could actually prove that we are the most entitled society in a few ways. One of which is we have a lot of rights. We have a lot of rights in America. Yep, America. And it's great that we have those rights, but most of us didn't actually have to fight or die to earn them. We just were gifted those rights. And when you've been gifted something that is now your right, it's really easy to fall into entitlement. The other thing that we have is we have a society that has been given more than any society has ever before because of technology. And yet with that, we also have the reverse, which is we are the saddest society. We are literally the most depressed. We are the society with the most anxiety. We are the society that has the most suicide. So we are one of the saddest societies with the most privilege. And so, we're talking about that, I think that shows why we're so entitled. But before we go, I want to mention this. Entitlement is one of these phrases that I think has been politically hijacked. Whereas one party will talk about entitlement from one side and the other party entitlement from the other. And I'd really like to, one of my goals here today, and I have some very very easy to achieve goals. But one of them is for you guys to have no political biases whatsoever today. Yeah. No, it's an easy target. You have to just take away your political biases and pretend like you have no political biases, have no even religious biases, have no confirmation biases. Yeah. No, we can do it. The other thing that I want, the other goal that I have today, is to convince you all to live out your life from now on forward being unoffendable. Yes, which is the book that I've been reading, Unoffendable. I do recommend it. It's a good book. In liberal or conservative times, I want us to be unoffendable people, okay? And we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I want to start with asking a question just to get a sense of where you guys are at. I often do this, of what you say, what you think of when you hear the word entitled. Okay? Trying not to get too political here. This could go badly. Anybody? Mike.
That's when you feel that because for some reason that you have a right to a certain thing or position or way of being treated.
Yeah. You have a right to a certain way of being treated. Okay. Anybody else? Spoiled. Okay? People are spoiled. Oops, somebody really liked that. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Undeserved, okay? So it's not something that you have earned, okay? Yeah. Rhett?
It's written in Thessalonians that if a man does not work, neither shall he eat.
Okay.
So I think about people that want free food and feel a whole lot better if they work for it, if they can.
Okay. All right.
Not misplace the person.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Entitlement is different than welfare.
Okay. We don't have to start an argument here. We're asking you what entitlement means.
But somebody could be entitled to something if he has earned it.
Okay. Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. So sometimes the reason we're entitled is because we feel like we've earned that thing. Yes, that's true. Again, he said the wages of sin are death. We're not asking for an argument here, but we're just talking about entitlement.
Your friend is missing. She went to school. So if you took the word apart, it means to bring into ownership.
Yeah, like you have a title for a house into ownership. Very good. Nice etymology here. You can sit up front if you want. Take her place. Somebody had to do it. I was hoping Andre would be there raising his hand, but he still wanted to sit in the back, I guess, you know. Those times are done, Andre. Get to the front. But, okay, entitlement. Yeah, okay, so great ideas about entitlement. I think that's a good point to start on. Let me talk about, in terms of the problem with entitlement, one of them, is that if we choose to be entitled, whether we've earned it in our mind or not, if we choose to focus on our rights, we miss out on so many other things, most importantly on gratitude. And I think that entitlement, in one way to put it, is you cannot hold both in your hand entitlement and gratitude. It's impossible. If you're fighting for your right, even if it is to party, okay, you are not able to just be grateful for the things that you have. And that is one of the things that is such a problem, and our society has fallen more and more into this entitlement. In fact, I would say even my mother, who is one of the most grateful women that I've ever met in my life, we were talking recently about computers, and she was saying she needs a new computer. And she was saying, because my current computer is too slow. It's really slow. And then she caught herself. And that's how wise she is. She immediately caught herself and she said, for computers nowadays, in today's standards, because in the 1990s, you had to start a computer with a crank system back in the day, right? Does anybody remember that, right? Where you could have a little gerbil on a wheel and it would have more processing power than your computer. Those were the days where I remember actually when the internet was first invented. I was there with Al Gore, and I remember when I was at my school, and it was the first day I got to experience the internet. And it was that day where you hear that you're there at the computer, you got your own computer, you're really excited, and you dial up. Because back in the phone, you had to call other computers. And you hear the, oh, didn't connect. Okay, try again. Which, by the way, I understand what the dial-up sound comes from. Like, I understand that it's because you're ringing to the internet and hoping that it answers. What I don't understand is what is the response, because there's either one of two options. Either a programmer decided that was going to be the noise, and I don't know what programmer would choose as the universal noise that every computer should have, or it was actually your computer crying out for help. What are you doing to me, man? Like, either that. There's one more option, and that was the first dubstep song. And right? That could be it. But I think the computer was just like, this is new for me. Be patient. I'm trying to figure it out. And then remember in the web bar, you'd have it have its own loading bar to let you know how many things you could do before the website loaded. And it would start, and then every once in a while, it would go to halfway, maybe even 75, and then it's back to square one. And you're starting over. What is the deal? It's like you're a runner on the starting line, you're starting sprinting, and then all of a sudden they're like, nope, somebody went early, get back to the starting line. You're like, what? Come on. But when you got there, when you finally got to that website, of the one of 3 websites that were currently available, you got the image of AOL, and you knew that you were on the web, and it was like magic. And it didn't matter that it took all of this just to get online, because we all of a sudden could talk to people all over the world together. And that was such a privilege. And now, as C.S. Lewis points out, no, mate, it's not C.S. Lewis, Louis C.K., the same thing. As Louis C.K. points out, he says that now you see somebody with their phone, and if it takes 2 seconds, they're like, what's wrong with this thing? And what's wrong with that thing? It's going to space and back. It's going literally to space and then back again. Give it a second, it'll get there. But I'm that guy, by the way. When I'm with my devices, if it doesn't load in 5 seconds, I'm shutting down Wi-Fi, I'm turning it back on again, I'm shutting down the internet, I'm checking my router, I'm like, something is terribly, terribly wrong here, because my internet isn't loading quick enough. And C.S. Lewis, C.K., whatever that guy, those guys together in my head also talk about traveling in the air. My wife and I are going to be traveling in the air today. We're going to be going on an airplane, and we're going to go from Florida to Michigan, and I'm actually going to end tonight in Michigan. I'm going to be, God willing, seeing my parents tonight. I mean, think about that. That's a miracle. That's amazing. We are flying in the air. Yet, when you talk to some people, it's like they are complaining about everything like it was the worst experience of their life. There's turbulence, and there's somebody kicking behind me, and you're just super upset because it wasn't a perfectly smooth ride, right? And you're forgetting that back in the day, this would have taken 30 years to get from Florida to Michigan, and people would have died. We would have had birth. We would have been completely different people when we arrived there. C.S. Lewis, or whatever, Louis C.K. was pointing out, he said one flight he had, this guy, all of a sudden they had internet for the first time, high-speed internet on the plane. He's like, it's fast, and he's like, this is amazing. But then it didn't work, and it shut down. And the person next to him like, this is bull, and he's all upset and everything. And Louis C.K. pointed out, how can you be so entitled that you're upset of something that you didn't know existed 8 seconds ago, and now you're like, I can't believe this doesn't work. What's wrong with this dang airline? I'll never fly in this airline again. But that's the human condition. See, we are always looking at reasons to take offense. And so, since we're always looking for reasons to take offense, I brought one. Marcy would have loved that pun, by the way. It was wasted on you guys. All right, so, no, I'm just kidding. But I have this corny pun here as a visual, and the visual is of taking offense. And the reason that this is not just a corny pun, but a really good, intelligent visual, thank you, it is because it is a reminder of what it does. See, they say good fences make good neighbors. And I'm looking forward to, when I go on vacation, being able to have some solitude. I need it sometimes. But I'm also aware that the most toxic thing that we could do to ourselves is isolate. The hardest thing to do is to have a relationship with someone where you truly know them and you're truly friends, but the most toxic thing that you could possibly do is fence yourself off from people, is put dividing lines. And last week when I talked about Charlottesville, that's what I talked about, is that we need to stop dividing our community amongst people that are in and people that are out. You're on this side of the fence, I'm on that side of the fence, and you never shall the two meet. And that's what we do when we take up offense. When we have someone who says something that angers us and upsets us, when we start to get offended, we put this right in our way. And one of my wife's favorite illustrations I did was about this guy who was hurt from the front, so he built up a wall so he would never be hurt from there again. And then he was hurt from the side, so he built up a wall there. And then he was hurt from the other side, so he built up a wall there. And then he was hurt finally from even behind. And so he finally built up a wall there, and he died. Because he had shielded him in from all the possible resources and substance of life. And this is what we do when we take up offense. When we decide that we're going to be offended by someone and something, and I have to say, Christians are the worst at being offended. Okay, we are always looking for reasons to be offended because we believe somewhere down deep that it's partly our job to make everything right. It is our job when we see someone doing something wrong over there to point it out and to fix it. And unfortunately, that leads us to be really quick to pull fences up and really quick to guard ourselves and protect ourselves from the outside world. The problem is, again, that we are called to live differently. And I know maybe some people are thinking about what this would actually mean. I hope some of you are thinking about what this would actually mean, of what it would mean to live an unoffendable life. One of the things that it would mean is that when people did something that was objectively offensive, objectively wrong, at least in our mind, because everything is objectively wrong, at least in our mind, that other people do, we would have to not hold the weight up, not hold the fence up and allow them in. Even when they hurt us, we'd have to allow them in. And this is something that I think could be oversimplified, and in the reality of it is pretty complicated, but it's always going to be a temptation to pick up this fence. I'm just going to put this over here so that we can keep it as the visual, but I don't have to hold it the whole sermon. Okay? It's really easy for us to find reasons. So what happens when someone is unjust? What happens with guys like Hitler? What happens with, we don't even have to go there, we've got Charlottesville. What happens with racism, and how do we tackle it if we're not willing to be offended? And I think that there's a great illustration for that. One is Jesus himself. One is this woman in this verse who in this verse had many reasons to be offended. Jesus was ignoring her. She could immediately have been offended. Then she cried for help, and Jesus called her basically a dog. Yes, women don't like it when you call them dogs, guys. Okay, this could have been a really easy reason for her to put up a fence and say, how dare he, I can't believe him, but she didn't because she understood humility. and she understand who she would. And one of the things I do want to mention about this verse, because mostly I just want to talk about the reason to not be offended, even when there's a good reason to be offended. But I also want to point out that what it was going on here with Jesus is that there was a covenant, a promise, a negotiation deal that was made many, many years ago with the Jewish people and God. They chose to follow God. My ancestors did not. They chose to make a deal where they were with God. My ancestors did not. God chose them and they chose God. And this deal was not for this Canaanite woman, okay? And God takes his vows seriously. He takes his promises and his word very seriously. And here's the greatest part about that for us. What God did and what Jesus did, both with this Canaanite woman and with us all at the cross, is he showed, deal or no deal, I want you. Deal in or out, I want you. And we have now been, all of those who are not from Jewish descent got chosen from the birth. All the rest of us got chosen by adoption. Through adoption, Jesus said, okay, you chose to walk away from me. Too bad, I'm still giving you another opportunity. I'm still coming after you because I love you with a grace that keeps coming for you. And no matter how far you go or how much you stray from that fence of God's love, he's breaking down the fences and coming after you. So here's this woman with every right to be offended, but she didn't take it. And I'll give you another example. Martin Luther King Jr. We remember that he said, I have a dream. But sometimes we forget that he said, in our thirst for freedom, let us not drink from the cup of bitterness and hatred. He said that the way we are going to take back our rights, our entitlements, right, our God-given rights, is not by force or violence, anger or aggression of any kind, but through love. And if I want to change someone's mind, I really have two options. One option is I can use force to try to force them to change their mind. And this can be in the form of violence. This can be in the form of shouting louder than them and cutting them off. It can be in the sense of making an argument and not letting them be right. And by the way, that's the one that I had most of my childhood. When I was younger, this is the person that I was. I felt like the most important thing was me being right. And I needed other people to learn how to be right too. And so my job was to convince them that I was right. And it was all about an argument. And if I lost that argument, I lost everything. And that was my world. And then I realized something. I realized that God didn't love me because I was right about him. He loved me because of what he believed, not what I believed. And so eventually my perspective flipped and I started realizing that relationship trumps all. And I have to say that now, and this might be controversial to some, especially in a church, but ideology is always after relationship. I don't care what that belief is, relationship comes first. So I will stand there wrong. I will lose the argument and be happy to if I can keep the relationship. Because here's the reality is, our God is a relational God. And we were wrong, and he kept us. So I don't want to have anything be a fence between me and my brother, me and my sisters, me and the people out there who are on the road to search after truth. I just want to listen to my relationship of my God and go from there. And that's what I believe is really important. Because what we do in life is we have God and all of his goodness, and we have us and all of our, what do you say? Emptiness. Great. So what is this? How would you describe this? Full. Full of what? Anybody want to guess? Liquid, very apt, okay. Anybody want to go a little deeper? Water, okay, you're right. It's water. There's nothing else in it. Okay, by the way, I do demonstrations sometimes, but I never do, oh, there it is. Okay, I never do tricks, okay? I haven't yet to do a trick, okay? No magic involved in this whatsoever. This is just science. All right? But it is, that's the natural world that God created, and he has his principles applied to it. So this, all right, it is not blocked, okay? There's a gap in it. It's important for you to note that, okay? So if I took this and I flipped it over and put it into this, what would happen? A mess. Yes, that is accurate. You have been to one of these descriptions before. You have seen me do sermon props, and you know, okay? Anybody else? Okay, what happens when you pour one glass into another glass? One glass gets full, the other one gets empty. Okay, great. So what happens if I take this? Okay, remember it's got a hole in it, so should be able to go from one to the other. So I'm going to flip it around, and what do you guys think is going to happen? I'm going to drop it all. Oh, I'm glad the whole thing didn't drop. Yeah, I was going to say, can I have a... Yeah. You want to hold it right there? Okay. I'm going to duct tape your fingers here. Okay, so... You know how people say the glass is half empty? And other people say the glass is half full, right? The glass... Thank you, Marcy. Marcy's going to be now like a phrase. It's like whenever someone knows something, they're pulling a Marcy, okay? Again, there's a hole in this, okay? So the glass is always full. It's just full partly of water and partly of what? Air. Okay. So, if you haven't guessed where I'm going with this already, okay, what happens when I flip this around? The gravity or... It just says nothing. Okay, so when we are sometimes in this position as Christians, and I wish it was straight enough to actually just hold up on its own, but we are in this position a lot as Christians, where we're basically right under God saying, God, pour out your Spirit on me. God, fill me up. But the problem is we're already full. We're already full to the brim. Our lives are full, our schedules are full, and more importantly, we're full of hot air. Our opinions are full, and we are right on them. Our beliefs are full, and we are right on them, and we are full of ourselves. You know, talking about the fence for a second, by the way, I'm just showing you how it's not a matter of time. It won't ever fall down, because the air is there. It's always going to stay up, unless I mess with it. But I'm talking about a fence. There's this verse that perfectly describes one of the things that I'm talking about today. And the verse is with Peter and Jesus. Now, Peter's first name was actually what? Anybody? Simon. Okay? Jesus gave him the name Peter. Peter means rock. And there's this point in which Jesus is asking his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they give all the answers to different things that people say. Good things. But then he says, who do you say that I am? And Peter pipes up and he says, you are the Messiah, the Son of David. You are our Savior, is what he's saying in that moment. And Jesus looks at him and he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood did not reveal this thing to you, but the Spirit revealed it to you from on high. And he said, and you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it. And here's the greatest part about that for me, is that on one, the gates of hell, that's a defense. And when it's saying that they will not stand, it means that God's love is going to march right into hell and back. That nothing can stop the love of God. That he is going to be victorious over the darkness. That he is going to do it, and he's going to do it with this rock. And what is that rock in this situation? It is the truth of who Peter really is. See, when we talk about humility, entitlement, all of these ideas, we sometimes think in a paradigm between self-pride and self-loathing. And we have this paradigm of these two different things, and maybe we think that the solution is balance, but it's not. You aren't supposed to be prideful. You aren't supposed to be self-loathing. You are supposed to be self-empty. Or as someone said once, you don't have to think less of yourself, just think of yourself less. To have your focus be on something bigger than you. So too much of the time we spend our life like this, where we are right there in the right position to receive from God, but we're so full of ourselves that we can never really do it. And unfortunately, what sometimes has to happen is for God, he has to kind of shake us up a little bit, and then all of a sudden, the seal is broken, and our self starts escaping, and God's love starts pouring into us. And as it pours into us, it changes, and this storm, this chaos, becomes filling us with abundant life and showing us what it looks like to be full of God's love. God wants us to be full. He wants to have us live lives full of abundant joy. And what we need to do, and we don't have to wait for tragedy. We don't have to wait for us to be at rock bottom. We can right now come before him and say, I want to be full of you, and I'm willing to be less. I'm willing to decrease so that you can increase. I don't want to be full of myself anymore. I want to be full of you. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to hold my opinions over here and just come forward. Hold my doubts over here and just come forward. That's what God is calling us to. And no matter who you are, whether you followed God for 5 seconds or for 500 years, you are still in the same human flesh where it's so easy to take up offense. It's so easy to say, this is my right, this is my privilege, and to miss out on God's love. Because let me tell you, God did not love you because of who you are, but because of who he is. He didn't love you because of what you did, but because of what he did. He loves you because of how great a lover he is. And you can come to him with pride and be broken. You can come to him with self-loathing and be lifted up. But either way, God wants you to live a life that's full of something bigger than you, better than you, and more full. Yeah. The child didn't, she's saying, when you see your child for the first time. And that's the reality, because this is about an Abba Father. This is about relationship. And if we want to make an impact in the world, there is nothing we cannot do through love. That's how powerful love is. And it says in this movie that I love, The Village, there's this scene where there's a scene where they send out this blind girl to go and try to get medicine, and she's alone in the woods. I didn't get a lot of sleep. That's the crying. I'm really a man. Don't cry. Anyway, okay. So, and there's this great scene where the guy says, they said to this guy who's her father, how could you do that? How could you send this blind girl out? And he said, because she loves. And the world bows to love. It is in awe of it. It cannot stand against it. It crumbles before it. And love is the most powerful tool we have. Self-sacrifice is not a perfect tool to create change in society. It is the only tool to create positive change in society. And if we do that, we make a difference. If we do that, we change the world. So I promised I wouldn't keep singing for you guys. I kept singing, and people, complained about my singing, chief among them, Rhett Palmer. And I'm not offended by that, but I decided that I would not sing for you today. Instead, I'm going to have Rhett come up and sing for you. Come on, Rhett. Now, this is a song that Rhett wrote, and it sums up a partly of how I was feeling today. This is a song that's not about what we deserve, but it's about how we love. I might have some wetness in there.
That's okay. Thank you. It's been nice being here. So, we're all plugged in and everything, right? I don't know how many of you have gone through a period where, or how often you still do go through a period, where feeling you don't deserve to go to heaven. I know I fight that all the time, and the pastor was talking about righteousness. Am I right? Or do I have his righteousness? And before God, only his righteousness. I know I don't deserve to go to heaven. I know with certainty it's true. But if you're gonna get to go to heaven, I hope and pray I get to go with you. They say David was a sinner, and Moses he murdered too. Paul held the cloaks of stone throwers, and even Peter he denied him too. They say though my sins may be as scarlet, that he can wash me white as snow. If he can change the hearts of thieves and harlots, perhaps we'll dance once more beyond the rainbow. I dreamt I was drowning in the ocean. It was a dark, dark, frigid sea. Some sailors pulled me up to safety, and you were there waiting for me. I know I don't deserve to go to heaven. I know with certainty it's true. But if you're gonna get to go to heaven, I hope and pray I get to go there too.